Sometimes I like to put a blanket around my neck and pretend that I'm Superman. And sometimes I have sexual fantasies that I'm Superman and I'm having super sex with Supergirl. Which might be kind of weird since in a lot of their storylines they're cousins. But that's a whole nother conversation. What conversation are we having here? Oh yeah, censorship. And here's the thing about censorship. The concept is completely wrong. It's like telling a man he can only live on skim milk because a baby can't eat steak. That quote is from Robert A. Heinlein, who it's often misattributed to Mark Twain, who himself was also very much against censorship. Mark Twain was upset about the fact because he wrote the Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn stories to be meant for adults. And he was very upset that people were giving these books to their kids. And they were just like, oh, it's a story about children, it must be for children, so here kids, go read this. And then they find out what the children are reading about, and then they're like, holy shit, Samuel, how the hell can you write this kid shit? How the hell can you expose this to our children? I mean, hello? And Judy Blume had a great quote though. She was like, if children should just be allowed to read whatever the hell they want, and then the parents can sit down and have the conversation with the kids. If parents are allowed to talk openly with their kids, then we won't need censorship because there will be less fear. And I feel like that's one of the main reasons that censorship exists in the first place, even though it serves no real purpose other than we pretend that we're protecting our children from the dangers of the world, but we're really not. People don't want to see boobies up on the screen because then that means children are going to want to look at real boobies. But you know what? Even if they never see a boobie in their life, kids are going to think about that stuff. They're going to want to see it. See, I mean, as a man, I don't even like, sex isn't really a big deal for me. But the reason that I want it is because my body craves it. Okay, like if I didn't have a penis, I could probably live without it for the rest of my life and I wouldn't be upset. But because I have a penis, it's all I ever think about on a constant basis. And just me and so many of my friends, we can't even go an entire week without at least jacking off once. Otherwise, we'll just go fucking crazy. It's just too much energy just builds up in that one specific region, and it's got to be touched frequently. It's something that is it's a very natural thing, and parents want to avoid the conversation, but by avoiding the conversation, you're doing so much more damage. It's a conversation that needs to be had early and often. Like me personally, I know I'm possibly an outlier. I did not grow up in the greatest of neighborhoods, but I lost my virginity when I was 11. And the reason I lost it was just because other people talked about doing it all the time. Sex was something that was so frequently talked about in school. And so one day someone offered to have sex with me and I was just like, okay, let's do this thing. And then a year later my friend introduced me to internet porn. And then by the time I was 14 years old, I knew, by freshman in high school, I already knew 7 different girls who had a baby. And one girl who had 3. Like seriously, 14 years old. I'd already had sex, I was already looking at porn, and I already knew a bunch of classmates who were parents. Still had not had the sex talk. So that's an issue. See, by avoiding the subject and trying to protect the decency or whatever, you're actually making shit worse. And so that's a big issue. People they don't want to have it seems like a lot of parents don't want to have the conversation with their kids, and they're being upset at the media for exposing them to something. But if you really don't want your kids to look at something, then be the parent, look over them, don't let them watch this. But you have to know at some point in time they're going to see it. Especially with the internet being everywhere nowadays. I've seen fucking 4-year-olds with tablets. If a kid wants to see boobies on Game of Thrones, then they're gonna go find Game of Thrones online. They're gonna go see the boobies. That's kind of all there is to it. And a lot of people a lot of the problems with censorship is that people want to blame the media for things that are wrong with their own child instead of looking at the child or themselves. Like a lot of people, a kid is getting bullied at school, so he takes a gun and starts shooting people in class. And they're just like, oh, he played violent video games. You know what? I've played violent video games my whole life. I've never once bought a gun. I've never once held a gun. You know what? I play Madden all the time. It's one of my favorite games. I'm not going to go try out for the San Diego Chargers. I'm not that stupid. I mean, video games don't make you want to do something that you don't already want to do. Worst case scenario, the most they can ever do is just encourage you to do something that you already have a propensity towards. Violent people are going to be violent, regardless of what video games they play. You can grow up watching My Little Pony and still end up being a serial killer. It has nothing to do. One thing has nothing to do with the other. It really doesn't. And so, like, me personally, as a guy as a writer, I write a lot of stories, and there are times when, like, I'll write stories that have swear words. There are times when I write stories that involve depiction, sex and other things like that. But like, if you don't want to see it, if you don't want your kid to see it, then don't see it. Don't take your kid to buy. Don't take your kid to see it. Don't buy the DVD and let them watch it. That's all there is to it. I'll tell you, it's rated R because of violence and depictions of sexuality, nudity, all this other stuff. So you know ahead of time this is what you're getting into. So if you don't want to see it, then don't watch it. But you know what? I have a right to, if I want a 13-year-old to tell his mother, fuck you, bitch, I can make that in my story if that's what I want to do. And if you don't want to see that in the story and you don't want your kids seeing it, well then don't expose them to it. I'm putting a product out in the world so that everyone else has the opportunity to watch it if they want to. And if you don't want to, then you can choose not to look at it. I'll warn you ahead of time, this is what you're in for. And it's up to you to make that choice for yourself. And so overall, censorship just in general, I feel like it does so much more to just hurt the world and hurt the development of young minds than it ever does to help them. Because really what it is, a lot of times parents are just trying to prevent their kids from becoming grown adults. And you know what? It's something that's going to happen. These are conversations you're going to have eventually. Now this is the world that we live in. It's something we have to talk about. So those are my thoughts on censorship. And sorry if they don't always make sense. So yeah, there's a train coming by, so I'm gonna cut this short.